Ms. Shahrukh.
Question 3, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, may I have the permission to take questions 3 to 7 all in one go?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, electricity demand is expected to have declined by around 2 to 4% last year in 2020. This was amidst the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. However, electricity demand will rebound as the economy recovers and grows. And this is also driven by new users such as data centers, the 5G telecommunication networks, the agri-tech facilities, as well as electric vehicles. We will harness the 4 switches to transform and diversify our energy supply. This is to help us achieve our vision of a clean and efficient energy future. These 4 switches comprise natural gas, solar energy, regional power grids, and emerging low-carbon alternatives like hydrogen. Singapore has progressively transitioned from oil-powered power plants since the early 2000s to adopt natural gas, and currently this is the cleanest burning fuel. Natural gas currently accounts for 95% of the electricity produced in Singapore, and I think all of you here in this House would appreciate the fact that we lack alternative energy sources. We do not have the natural resources, the land area, as well as climatic conditions necessary for the large-scale deployment of renewable energy sources such as hydro and wind. Natural gas will continue to be the mainstay and main source of energy for power generation to serve our households and industry reliably in the medium term. And this is as we continue to develop the other 3 switches. Our second switch, which is solar energy, currently is the most viable source of renewable energy within Singapore. And over the last 10 years, installed solar capacity has increased more than 100-fold, from 3.8 megawatt peak in 2010 to around 400 megawatt peak last year in mid-2020. We are accelerating our efforts, and we will almost quadruple our solar capacity to 1.5 gigawatt peak by 2025, 5 years from now. And by the end of 2030, we hope to achieve 2 gigawatt peak. So by 2030, we expect our second switch to supply around 3% of our total electricity consumption. And of course, depending on the state of technology at that point in time and cost, we hope to be able to do more. Our local companies partner the government in the deployment of solar photovoltaic systems. For example, the Sunsip Group is a major participant in the Solar Nova program, and this deploys solar panels in public sector buildings and spaces. When these companies invest in overseas renewable companies and projects, they can bring valuable insights and capabilities back home here in Singapore. These projects may someday also export electricity to Singapore as well. And this brings me, therefore, to the third switch, and that's on regional power grids. So regional power grids or electricity imports is our third switch. Today, some Southeast Asian countries have an abundance of hydroelectric power and other renewable energies. If we can connect the regional grid well, it will provide greater resilience and sustainability for the entire system. For a start, we are trialling imports of up to 100 megawatts from Peninsular Malaysia. 100 megawatts is about 1.5% of our peak electricity demand. So there will be minimal impact on the reliability as well as cost impact of our electricity supply. Our preference, of course, is to import electricity from renewable energy sources, and hence, the cleanliness of the generation source will be a major consideration in selecting the importer. The EMA, or Energy Market Authority, will select the importer through an open and a competitive selection process, and it is expected to sell electricity via the Singapore Wholesale Electricity Market, SWEM, to interested buyers. Other companies, like Sun Cable, have also approached EMA to import electricity to Singapore. We welcome these interests, but we have to also be mindful to pace these imports to ensure that they complement and do not undermine the reliability of our electricity supply, as well as the stability of our electricity market. So discussions on Sun Cable's proposal to supply solar power from Australia's Northern Territory to Singapore are ongoing. At this particular point in time, EMA is unable to share details given the commercial sensitivities. I think a point that I believe everyone in the House would appreciate. Last but not least, for our fourth switch, we are also working intensively with industry, with the research community, to study emerging low-carbon technologies, such as hydrogen and carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We will facilitate the development of these technologies through various research, development, and demonstration funding initiatives, including a low-carbon energy research funding initiative. This initiative will see around 50 million Singapore dollars being used to explore areas such as the supply, the storage, and downstream uses of hydrogen, as well as carbon capture and storage for use in building materials or fuels. By tapping on all four switches, Singapore will be able to diversify our energy sources. This will enhance our access to secure and competitively priced energy supplies, and this will reduce our energy security risks. The future energy mix will depend on technological advances in the four switches. This will need to be complemented by efforts to enhance energy efficiency across all sectors and consumers. The government will work hand in hand with our workforce, with researchers, with industries and consumers to achieve our vision of a cleaner, a more efficient, and a more secure energy future. Thank you.
Mr. Saktiandi Supat.
For the answers. I have two supplementary questions. First question is in relation to energy resilience, and I rightly pointed out that you shared and answered some of the questions that I had in mind for my supplementary question. But the question I have is, you mentioned that the energy mix will be dependent on the technology improvements over time. But can you roughly share the percentages target for some of these switches at this point in time? Because as you can see, if you look at the electricity reliance now, we're relying a lot from natural gas. And you mentioned that I think 95%, more than 95% of the electricity generated in Singapore is via imported natural gas. And it's largely from Malaysia and Indonesia. So there is a concentration effect of by country to Malaysia and Indonesia. So there's the mix by country, for one, if you can share going forward over the medium to long term, and also in terms of the switches, if you can share. My second question is regards to, as we proceed to these four switches going forward in the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years, for example, in Malaysia's case, where we're trying to get the electricity imports from Malaysia into 2021, we have an electricity connector infrastructure with Malaysia. So going forward, if the Sun Cable project does materialize, how do we get some of this electricity direct electricity connectivity to Singapore when we have these switches exposing us to various countries as far afield as Australia if the Sun cable project does happen, and as far afield as Indochina going forward. So thank you, Minister.
I thank the Honourable Mr. Saktiandi for his questions. With regards to the percentage breakdown of the 4 switches, at this particular point in time, it's 95% natural gas, the natural fossil fuels, which we, as I've alluded to earlier, is the cleanest fossil fuel today. It's difficult to give a percentage breakdown, but suffice to say that by 2030, we expect to peak in terms of carbon emission at about 65 million tons of carbon dioxide emission. And our target is to halve that by 2050. So from 65 million tons, we will halve it to 33 million tons by 2050. And by the latter half of this century, we will achieve a net zero carbon emission. That's the target that we have set for ourselves. So depending on the technology development over the next 10, 15 to 20 years, we should see an increased migration towards renewable energy, of which, as I've alluded to earlier, solar is one of them. And a higher degree, depending on the trial import of this 100 megawatt from Peninsular Malaysia, a higher reliance on drawing from the regional power grid as well. In fact, just last year, we signed an MOU. We signed, I think, not an MOU, I think it was an intent to procure another 100 megawatt from the Lao PDR via the Lao, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore grid network itself. So we hope that in time, we can also, through this, reach out to more ASEAN countries to tap on this regional grid, and that is another one of our diversification strategy. So to the extent that we are able to draw from the regional power grid, we certainly would. The Sun Cable project, as I've alluded to, is also something that we're in active negotiations. Obviously, we are not at liberty at this particular point in time to communicate the details of it because of the commercial sensitivities. Now, to your last point about the concentration risk, today, a significant amount of the natural gas that we are using to burn comes from, indeed, Malaysia and Indonesia through the PNG. But we have also now diversified the sources of the procurement via LNG, the liquefied natural gas, from further countries, further afield from other countries, further afield from us as well. And that includes the Middle East, UAE, etc. So the exact breakdown of that, I, at this particular point in time, cannot provide to the honourable member. Thank you.
Sir Louis Chua.
I thank the Minister for the detailed explanation. I've got 2 supplementary questions. I think the first is in relation to setting of targets. I note in Minister's speech that we are expected to employ 2 gigawatt peaks of solar energy by 2030, which is expected to contribute to 3% of our electricity generation needs, and also that we are going to have an emissions target for 2030 and 2050. And in relation to these, if I may ask if the Ministry would consider setting a target mix for the amount of electricity that's going to be generated from renewable energy sources as a target that we can strive for together as a nation. And I think if you look at the IEA estimates at present, globally, as about 30% of the electricity generation is really from renewable sources. And I recognize that we have geographical constraints, but is there perhaps a goal that we can strive towards, especially when we are already considering new green energy sources such as hydrogen, which I recognize that the EMA is already studying. The second is in relation to the calculation of electrical tariffs. Right now, given that 95% of the energy mix is derived from natural gas, I think the fuel cost component is pretty much based on average natural gas prices, especially if future transmission from regional grids are involved. How then would the fuel cost as well as network cost component be calculated, and how would that be passed on to consumers at the end of the day? Thank you.
Thank you. And I thank the Honourable MP for his question. To the first point in terms of working on the targets itself, indeed we are, and we have been sort of, we have actually been looking at the different technologies that's available at this particular point in time, and also through working with the research institutions, the universities and so on, to see how we can also take on some of these initiatives with regards to carbon capture utilization, to see how we can set that target. I think in due time we would be able to share that once a more definitive landing on some of these technologies are available. With regards to the renewable energy targets, the 2 gigawatt peak in terms of solar power, the renewable solar power, will come in by 2030. We are on track by 2025 to achieve 1.5 gigawatts. So to reach that target by 2030 should not be a major problem. In fact, we hope that we can do even better than that. Now, with regards to the electricity tariffs, it is at this particular point in time still a fairly commercial venture, and as I've alluded to earlier on, the pricing will be competitive. There will be an open, transparent bidding process, and this electricity will be then sold into the Singapore wholesale electricity market. When we work out the arithmetic behind it, from the import of that 100 megawatt from regional power grid itself, the pricing should not be significantly higher than what we are already getting today in terms of the electricity tariffs. So I hope that that reassures the Honourable Member of Parliament. Thank you.
Ms. Cheryl Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, let me declare that I'm a senior executive with a gas and engineering company that deals with energy sources. I actually want to thank Minister for his response on the diversification of, to ensure our energy sort of needs over the years. But with respect to the fourth switch, I have this question for Minister, because when it comes to dealing with low carbon energy sources or alternatives, the very key aspects of the things, one is around policies and the other one around subsidies and fundings. So I would like to know, in order for us to move forward, because our current carbon tax program is actually very low compared to many countries in the world, and we actually got a very slow sort of like target that we want to achieve by 2030 and beyond. So I want to know how this level is going to impact the kind of low carbon alternatives we will have in future. And the other aspects around subsidies, will the government look at more programs apart from just funding the technology programs itself, but directly subsidizing some of the very attractive alternatives in order for us to achieve this target of decarbonization earlier than later? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member, Ms. Cheryl Chan, for her very insightful questions and her points. I think for the carbon tax, indeed, even if we raise the carbon tax significantly, it's not going to move the needle that much in terms of the overall pricing. Where we are now looking at is also on as I've said, in the fourth switch itself, it's not just about carbon capture, utilization and storage. It's also looking at hydrogen utilization and leveraging on this hydrogen technology itself. To that end, the EMA, the ministry, is actively pursuing significant projects to see how we can not just extract the hydrogen, but also in terms of the transportation of that hydrogen, because it is indeed, if we're able to tap on it, it is going to be the cleanest fuel, and the byproduct of it is water. So these are the a few big initiatives that we are currently embarking on today. With regards to the carbon capture, one of the things that we are also exploring is employing carbon credits, and we are also contemplating looking at some form of a carbon trading platform so that we can leverage on the multiple initiatives that's available to help us reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you.